Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, I am speaking with Frieda Maher, who runs SalesPOD, a consulting firm focused on the sales back office and the systems that make it work, like CRM. Frieda has been deeply involved in the deployment of some large-scale Dynamics 365 CRM solutions, and we speak about some of those experiences. We also talk about the types of challenges that she helps organizations solve, like the relationship between front office and back office workers, structuring and running CRM-related projects, and developing the ability to continue to improve those systems over time. We also touch on her perspective on the Power Platform and some great examples of how users are leading by example. Frieda Maher, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure. It's always fun to talk about the work that we do.
Absolutely. And, I've had project management and project success, I guess, on my mind for some reason recently. So I was really happy to be able to set up some time for us to chat so I could learn a little more about you and some of the things that you've been doing. I guess maybe we should just start by, I should start by maybe just asking you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more and kind of the kind of work that you do sort of in the CRM realm, and maybe we can go from there.
Great. I'm happy to do that. So my name, as you said, is Frieda Maher. I run my own consulting firm, SalesPOD. We do what I call sales back office consulting, which is really sales ops work, but with a real focus on CRM and how the back office and the technologies that we bring can support sales teams. So that often turns into diagnostic work for companies that need help either with their sales ops generally or CRM specifically, and often turns into CRM projects, whether it's remediating a broken CRM or implementing a new CRM. So I've done that kind of work for near on 30 years now. It's showing my age, and love it. Love making a difference with CRM and helping people use the software.
To me, one of the unique things I've heard you talk about and write about is, I guess a couple of things. One is kind of identifying the kind of the interplay between sort of back office, the needs of sort of personnel who make the back office element of a system successful, and then the front office, which I guess in the sales and the CRM world is often either customer service agents or sales reps. That would sort of be the front office maybe, and the challenge that it's like not natural. It doesn't seem like it's maybe natural for back office and front office people who are both key to successful systems. It's not like easy to make those two sort of come together and have an end result of a great system. Is that really one of the places that you end up spending a lot of your time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times both of those two groups that you talk about get frustrated with each other. And they feel that they don't hear what the other person said. So an IT, like a CRM back office person, will often go, if you just told me what you want, I could build it for you. And the salespeople are going, I don't know what I want. I don't understand what it is that you're building. And so they end up in this standoff. And they're really just not talking each other's languages, and they don't seem to have, in some cases, the tools to do the translation. Which is such a pity, because the tools, like great tools, can make a big difference to salespeople. They can really, it can help their productivity. It can grow revenue. It can do, like the effective use of technology can make a big difference to a sales team. But often the sales teams just kind of don't have exactly the right skills and language to connect with the people that are building that technology.
Well, how do you tend to get brought into projects? Do you ever end up kind of walking in at a point where there's already been some level of tension or failure, or do you tend to get engaged earlier and help people avoid that?
I strongly prefer getting engaged earlier and helping people avoid it. That's and I do a fair bit of that work. Every now and then I'll go in and go into an organisation much more about what they're doing with their sales team often, and they'll say things like, oh, we've got this CRM and we hate it and it's useless. And I'll ask them what product it is, and it'll be, one of the major CRM products. And you'll go, and I'll sort of say, that's not my experience. Like, those are very good products. And then you take a step further and you look at what's been implemented and think, oh no, that's why you hate it. And one of the kind of most obvious examples of that I ever had was that they put quite a junior, it was a small project, a relatively small team. They put quite a junior dev in to do the implementation. The sale had been made by all the senior people, and they had a junior dev and one of the senior salespeople who wasn't a technologist. And the senior salesperson was expressing their requirements, but in a way that the dev went, oh, okay, so I have to do exactly that. And he drifted the system so far away from what it was supposed to do natively that it didn't work at all. Mm. And he should have said no. He should have said no to some of those requests and gone, what are you really trying to achieve? Let's see if we can work a different way of doing that, because if I do what you've asked me to do, the whole thing is not going to work well. There was so much kind of code that, every, how it is in the world of cloud software, every upgrade that comes, it should work really smoothly if it's been set up properly. But if you've put too much code in and you've messed around too deep in what the system does natively, every upgrade that comes is a world of pain. And they were, well and truly down that track.
Yeah, I can imagine. One other thing that just kind of occurs to me, it's a little bit of a a different question, but when you deal with companies or clients of yours, do you find that it's important for either you or maybe I don't know if they would have if they're a bigger organization, maybe they have a big system integrator that they do sort of ongoing work with, service with. Is it important for either you or someone else to sort of stay engaged with a lot of these companies over time to make sure they don't sort of fall back either into complacency or just that they become dissatisfied with things and don't continue to iterate and make adjustments?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily me. Like that is a part of what I see as the role of a sales operations team. And large organizations, on the whole, I think recent Miller-Hyman research sort of suggests that pretty much all large organizations have some sort of sales operations team. It's just the scope varies a little bit. But large, a sales operations team should be a real catalyst for keeping, the systems and the processes and the adoption and utility of those things, because they die because they're not useful. And right. Something's changed. The process is no longer useful. The system is no longer useful. And instead of moving the process and the system along with the business change, if you're not having the right kind of care and feeding of it, it does die.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. I guess that really is I guess as you get to a smaller team, that becomes even more of I guess it could be a challenge really for any organization if they haven't prioritized or understood the importance of that, that sales operations role. It must be really easy to maybe even not even realize it's happening or not even realize that, the opportunity is really slipping away in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a real historical kind of expectation about how systems are maintained and supported. The old kind of legacy systems like the on-premise legacy systems where people did kind of giant implementations and then put the whole thing in, and then that became the way you process your transactions, but you didn't have to keep on fiddling with it all that much. You could not really invest in anything other than kind of quite low-level maintenance because you weren't getting any upgrades. And often the parts of the business that those kind of core systems supported were pretty static. Like it was only when, a new tax regime came in that you sort of went, oh no, we've got to change our system now for the new tax regime. And so like they poured a bunch of money into making a change to support the new tax, and then they pulled all the money away and did something else. Whereas these very, very front of house systems that are engaging with, either the customers themselves or the parts of your business that interact daily with the customers, those are usually much more dynamic. Like your external environment is changing much more than your core kind of internal transactional environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that, well, one of the things I wanted to get your take on, maybe it's related to this to, some degree, is sort of your experience using Scrum, using agile methods to maybe other ones to help to, I don't know, to organize projects, to get teams working together. Can you talk a little more about the role that agile plays when is it something you're always looking at, or is it case by case?
It's not right for absolutely everything. That is true, and often a very purist approach to agile is really not right for everything. I think every agile project I've done, I've come in and gone, oh, okay, it works like this, and then oh no, in this situation it's not going to work like that, and so you have to make adjustments to suit the environment. But the core of agile, which is not building a lot of things before you've engaged the people that will use it, is always useful. It really, particularly in that kind of sales environment where if you tried to write everything that they needed, you would need to ask the sales team to sort of abstract new ways of working in their heads with systems that they're not necessarily familiar with, and then give you definitive answers. And that's hard at the best of times for any person. But for sales teams, that's terribly hard. So if you can avoid asking them to make decisions in a really abstract environment, you make it in a concrete environment where you're showing them software, and then shortly after that, they're using software and going, actually, no, that doesn't work for me. Like, you take it from the abstract to the concrete, and it allows you to make a better decision about what you do next.
Yeah, that makes sense. That certainly makes sense. I mean, in your experience, how often? I know you said sort of not always the same approach isn't going to work in every case. Does it apply more often than not? Is it like more than 50% of the time you're able to use some of those ways of thinking or approaches to when you get brought into a project?
Yeah, no, I'd probably these days seldom not do it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's probably the exception where it's not useful than the other way around.
I mean, I guess the other side of that is that you know the right way to apply a lot of these techniques. I have just like sort of this high level understanding of agile, and haven't managed a project on it, so I could come in and say, oh, it sounds like a good idea, but I might not be able to pull it off without a lot more study and experience. So I imagine it's the kind of thing where it's the the person who knows how to apply those techniques as well as sort of the theory of it.
Yeah, particularly if it's a reasonably large project.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's only a relatively small project, you can probably practice with the concepts without getting too stuck. But if you've got a Scrum master and kind of 5 devs and a business user community of hundreds of people, you'll probably come unstuck reasonably quickly if you don't have someone with some experience that's directing that show.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned larger projects, and I don't want to jump ahead too far here, but I mean, the one that I am very interested in learning more about from you, from what I've read of it, is the UNSW, University of New South Wales, and a project that you spent a lot of time on there. Their CRM. You spent multiple years sort of helping to lead the product and its development there, which was a Dynamics CRM, Dynamics 365 based solution, but really wide-reaching, right? Can you talk a little bit about sort of what that solution overall, how it grew and evolved, maybe what it ended up looking like?
Yeah, no, I absolutely can. So that was a very wide, yeah, as you say, wide-ranging implementation. Like it crossed over, lots of parts of Dynamics. Like there was a large component of service around the student services piece, case management, all of those kinds of pieces, as well as sort of sales and marketing in terms of the prospective student recruitment, but also sales in the sense of the products that the university actually sells to the community, which is something that you don't necessarily see. You wouldn't necessarily think of universities doing, but they sell, consulting services and knowledge services, and they go to market really offering their research to industry partners. So there's a lot of kind of sales process that's tied up with what universities do too.
Sure.
And in very large universities like UNSW, I think it's a fairly unique feature of Australian universities that they're often very, very giant. So at any one time, UNSW will have in excess of 50,000 students and thousands of staff. So it's a large, complex organisation with multiple faculties operating quite independently, but doing the same work and having students that run through one administrative process. So coordinating all of those things is really helpful with a CRM, and particularly now I reflect on I guess what we did and what the benefits that we offered, and I am terribly grateful because I was actually an alumnus of UNSW, so I was, had a little bit of self-interest in making the institution that I had a big connection with go well, and in these sort of challenging times where student enrolments are unclear and international student numbers are struggling, and the communication with students and managing their experience at the university is so important, because we've, in the space of one session, we've gone from starting teaching students online to finishing offline, face-to-face, and finishing teaching them online, and having a single place where they can lodge requests, do it electronically, not have to turn up at a desk, which is frequently what we made them do, and they're not allowed to go to desks anymore, to have all of that capability and to manage it, and to manage, to allow the staff to manage the inquiry numbers and to make sure that there were enough of them getting through the work. If they had what they had before, that would have been a nightmare. So they've now got a dynamic system that brings all of that together for them and allows students to self-serve with a lot of their queries and questions online in an environment where that's never been more important. Mm-hmm, so mm-hmm. it was a massive project, and one that gave the university really important capability.
Thinking back to what you were saying a little while ago about about iterating, about verifying new capabilities over time. Do you imagine that's something that they are in a good position to just continue doing? Because I think you're not there at the moment, right? You've sort of moved on to other work, other clients. But do you get the sense that sort of that way of working has continued there, sort of as they've moved ahead and sort of modernized, had a system that they were able to continue pushing forward?
Yeah, I think it has to a degree. I think it's it's hard work. It's hard work for them to maintain, and it was, I think, a bit of a shock to the users to go from quite a large project team that was able to iterate very quickly to, a much smaller BAU team and a different level of investment, and to get the new normal around what those iterations look like. But they are absolutely still iterating. They're still using those processes and still developing the products. And that's, that's an extraordinary benefit for them, having come from those sorts of legacy systems environments that I talked about, that were a little bit, well, we set that up and then we don't do anything with it anymore.
Yeah. Could you talk about that aspect of it to some extent? Because I imagine that must have been a huge challenge, trying to take legacy systems and basically move those workloads into a single unified. Well, I don't know. Was it moving into like a single unified kind of dynamic CRM or Dynamics 365 instance? Or can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a single Dynamics 365 instance, but it was not covering everything that university did. So there was still very big proportions of the transactional work of the university, like enrollment, kind of results processing, all of those things that happen in their student management system. So that's from a university perspective, that's a kind of their ERP system, really, and that remained. And so the integration between that system and the CRM was really crucial, and that was a big body of work for us on the project.
Did you were there like a range of other systems that did get consolidated though?
Yeah, so they had a bunch of existing CRM systems because both the systems and the processes were very decentralized in faculties. Each faculty had their own thing going on, whether that was, and in one case it was actually like a particularly ancient dynamic system that we rolled into the new system. There were other technologies, other systems and other technologies that were being used in different ways in different faculties and divisions there, and all of them were ultimately retired as we went on.
Was that like a step-by-step sort of, were those like each of those like a mini project that you had to work through to, I mean, how do you, I'm just thinking if I were coming into a situation like that, I used to be I used to do sort of project work in a past life. And I would think for something of that scale where, there's all these systems, the first thought is where do you even, where does your team even get started attacking it, or attacking is the wrong word, but, working with the different groups that have these systems to plan each one to move over. I mean, each one must be a big effort on its own.
Yeah, some more than others. There were absolutely.
That's true. Some might be saying, "Please get rid of this."
Some of the larger ones. Yeah. Oh, yeah. For some of them, they were absolutely going, "Please get rid of this." It's costing us a fortune and giving us nothing. Why are we here? So there was absolutely some of that. But I think for us, in that environment, the key was bringing together all the people that were using different systems and realizing that they were doing different things, but to do the same job. So having big kind of design sessions up front where people could get, I guess, a consistency of purpose and a shared vision around what we were trying to achieve with the CRM. And then we could step back and work on each of those components, each of those shared components. And it worked for us. It may not work for everyone, but to build a core of what the new system would be, and then bring each new group on one by one. So we brought them in one by one, looked at what they were doing, looked at what they need, looked at what we built that they'd already had some input into. Like the central design was input into by everyone, but then as we brought each group on board, we took a fresh look to make sure it met all their needs, it could accept all the things that they were doing, and we iterated around incremental needs of each group as we went through. Fortunately, particularly as we got to the end, we found that we'd covered most of it. And so we didn't need to, by the time we got the seventh faculty on, it was pretty much, okay, this is what you're doing, this is how it works. Have you got any questions? Have you got any concerns? Right. Oh, no? Okay, go.
Right, come on into the tent. Everyone's here already. Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Well, I don't know if that's, I don't know what to put.
No, that's a brilliant analogy.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly how it was.
So I wanted to ask a little more about something it's been on my mind really more on the ERP side, and ERP projects and implementations more than CRM. But I think it really, from what you've talked about, it seems like it really kind of might apply. And it's, I guess, the question of who's leading a project, whether, and I'm thinking specifically, is it the business groups that are going to be sort of using and benefiting from the product, the end result, or is it the IT team? And I know that I'd love to get your input on that. I mean, I know it sort of lies somewhere in between, that there has to be a good partnership, but in your view these days, do you tend to see either much tension between sort of the business owners and the IT group in making CRM successful, or I don't know, what's sort of the state of things there as you talk to organizations about their CRM needs?
I think I thought it had moved on, to be honest. When I started my career doing this kind of work, I thought, gee, by the time I'm old, and certainly when I was 20, I'd have thought I was old now. By the time I'm old, technology will be so ubiquitous, everyone will use it, they'll understand it. Like the business people will be right on top of it, they'll really get it, and it'll be fantastic. And that's not true. That even though everyone has technology in their back pocket that is more powerful than anything that existed when I started work, that their understanding of how to direct a process into a technology supported framework is still as it was 30 years ago in many respects. And in fact, in some respects it's worse, because people go, but my phone can do that, why can't you make my CRM do it? It's not always that easy. So I think that the gap can sometimes be further than it was, but that's also an organisation by organisation problem. So some organisations, the salespeople are actually really savvy and get involved and have no problem taking ownership. But in other organisations, whether it's like historic kind of cultural factors, there are sales teams that still are distrustful and disliking their CRM and and feel like the technology is not useful to them. Mm-hmm. But increasingly, it's a core business technology. You cannot get by without one. Just like your customers expect you to have an email address, they expect you to keep a track of what you've done with them.
Right.
There's no excuse for a salesperson not to understand what their service team's doing. There is no excuse for that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I completely understand what you're saying. One of the things that I do wonder about is, it seems like when Microsoft gets up there, and I've seen it with Salesforce presentations I've listened to, and the big ones at the major conferences and so forth, and they sort of talk about the roadmap and the coolest, flashiest sort of new features they're pushing out, and usually they're things that I think would get if not a sales rep excited, or at least a sales manager excited to use with his team, or a customer service team. I mean, they seem like they're a lot of these kind of things that would really make the sales rep's role in many cases better, make them more effective, and so forth. But I mean, I know it's a matter of actually getting those things in front of rolling those things out is probably a challenge, and that's the other part I think of it. There's some cool tools out there, but are the teams that support them ready? Have the the bandwidth to add a new a big new module on top of what they're doing, or even just like sort of a cool new interface or something that would maybe make the sales team happier than they are today. Or do they get, maybe it goes back to my earlier point, do they sort of get stuck with, well, here's what we were able to get out in the last iteration, and we don't have, pick your excuse, we can't get you something new for the next 6 months. I don't know. Any perspective on that? Just because I see so much cool stuff every twice a year in Microsoft's case, that they're pushing out all these new features. I just don't know how many people are absorbing them.
Yeah, no, and it's often it's really sad, because I think a lot of the technology and the new features don't get traction just because there is, it's part of that fire hose of information that's coming at everyone these days. That a salesperson has or already has a fire hose of information coming in about their competitive environment and their customers and new products and what their organization's doing and how they're expected to sell. And then you add in, by the way, we could change the technology and that might be good for you, it might not. And if you add that to some of the challenges that you then have in implementation, where the new technology is great, but the quality of your data is really poor, or you just don't have the resources to do that implementation. And I think data quality particularly is one that I think holds a lot of people back, that they can't use new things because they see this cool new thing with kind of 3 things on the selection list, and then you open it with your own data and you think, oh, there's 10,000 of those.
Right.
Like,
half of them have like the same name. Right.
Yes. So there's just there's this kind of it jumps from being cool and new to being too hard with the speed of light, and having people that can direct you through that, and also work out what's going to make a difference, because there's a lot of cool new toys, but there's not necessarily all that many of them that will pay for themselves.
I wanted to ask, are there any that you really have your eye on, or that you think will end up being really useful in the near term for organizations? I mean, I'll tell you the 2 that I sort of think are top of mind for me. One is sales, and they're both just honestly because I've seen Microsoft push, sort of try to push on them recently. So I then thought, let me look into this. One was sales enablement, and there's several vendors in that realm, and then the other is customer data platforms, which is one that can be debated. It gets lots of debate these days of whether it's valid or not. But I don't know. Those are 2 that come to mind. Are there any that you like legitimately feel like a lot of companies ought to be looking at?
The sales enablement piece, I think a particular class of customer will absolutely find that really interesting. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing kind of large, big complex deals, high value deals, it's probably going to be harder to pitch that technology if it's quite a transactional sales process, and quite a simple sales process that doesn't evolve and doesn't change customer by customer. But for example, if you're selling, particularly if you're selling systems, if you're selling kind of big systems to big customers, I would see that capability being really helpful. And it will tie up with what internal sales ops and sales enablement teams are doing. And if, so sales enablement teams, if they're not partnering with their sales ops teams properly, we'll find it difficult, because then it'll just be another whole bunch of extra tools rather than something that's helpful and completely integrated.
Sure. Okay. So that's an example for, at least for maybe some of the offerings that are out there. It might really align really well with what these teams are already trying to do, and it might just sort of improve the way they do, either just automate more of it, or give them more capabilities that they already can kind of take and run with. Yeah.
And I think it's probably linking some of the enablement capability, like making the enablement capabilities more accessible, like making it so that they can, there's fewer barriers to using it properly. Because I know about the vast majority of problems in every one of these things is it's hardly ever the technology that's really the problem. It's the change management. It's getting people to actually use it and see its value and climb over that first hill of, oh, really? You're asking me to use something new? Is it really going to be worth it? The hill you have every time, and it's not so bad these days, but back in the day when Microsoft released a new version of Office, and you sort of go, oh, really? Now I have to learn where all the buttons are and where all the functions I use all the time are.
Right.
and for a sales team, it's like, oh, now I have to learn something new about the way I have to, prepare for every call or record every call or plan every call. Plan my day. I've got to learn a whole bunch of new things to do all of that. I'm not that unhappy with how I was doing it before, or manage my pipeline, or all the things that sales teams do. It's giving them, enough support and incentive to kind of climb over that initial change barrier. And I think a lot of systems never really get critical mass over it. and that's why adoption falls away.
Okay. Yeah. Um, are there other things about, I mean, given the fact that, in the last, I don't know, 5 years, I'm just, maybe you can give me a better number, but it seems like almost all of these systems are run from public cloud vendors now. I'm not sure what the exact number would be when that became just the prevailing approach, but did that change anything about the nature of rolling these out and the challenges that you just talked about, or is that really just more of a platform question?
Oh no, it's if I think about what I did, like the sort of work that I did earlier in my career, but the sort of things that we do today are impossible if you don't do it in the cloud. Like it's particularly agile development and iterative releases.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you've got people kind of in the field doing things remotely, if you're trying to upgrade things on every person's device and like it's mad. Like
Right.
that's, you don't do a release. You avoid at all costs doing frequent releases because it's so painful to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you're in the, I have a really vivid memory of the first time I ever started an implementation, like with a cloud vendor, and I was talking, like I was in a sales ops role at the time, and I was talking to the implementation partner, and I said, look, this thing that you're asking me to demo, it's not right. I need to have these, those two fields in a different place, and that list of values has to be different. And he went, okay, refresh your screen. And I refreshed my screen, and it was different. It was fixed, and it was like magic.
Yeah, that's funny.
And like it was truly like I had seen somebody do a magic trick. I just went, you used to have to, package it all up and then deploy it all into people's things, and it was such hard work. And that single transformation where you can be changing, fixing, developing your system and be so responsive and have it be in the hands of people straight away. Like I don't know how anyone can not work like that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, today it seems like the next iteration of that is, in the Microsoft space anyway, is Power Apps. I mean, every MVP is so excited about the possibilities of not just Power Apps, but the Power Automate, Power Apps, and Power BI and the Common Data Service. I don't know. Do you see that as something that's really going to start playing into a lot of the planning that you do? When you're helping plan projects or plan solutions for your clients, that's going to be, rather than saying, oh well, we can change the items on this list, it would be like, we can build a Power App or build sort of an XRM style solution rather than messing around with out of the box.
No, I think it's a huge opportunity. And every now and then I see sort of presentations or work people have been done and get, I guess, a glimpse of more of what can be achieved. I'm really interested. I'd be interested to hear from, your listeners and other people about what happened, what's been happening in their worlds, because I think the people that have got the vision and the expertise to make a good choice about that are going to be so in demand.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that, again, some of the things that we were talking about earlier, where, if you're asking sales teams, or in fact any kind of business user to abstract things, that's going to be, it's even harder when you're talking about something that can be anything you want, like it can be in Power Apps.
Right.
But that's not they're like that abstraction is really hard. But if people have got the vision and the capability to look at a business problem and go, I could solve that with Power Apps and I could solve it really quickly and easily. But the people that have that are going to be hugely in demand because they're going to be able to do things that their users think is magic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a certain it's a certain sort of very unique skill set. Some people in IT departments have it. Some IT leaders have that. Others don't. And some people, in sort of project management type of roles have it. Others don't. So it really is going to. I'm just guessing here. I think it's really going to vary from place to place. And also because you can do so much and you can go so far, like you were saying when we started. You can take a customization and take it, or you can build an app in the Power Apps case perhaps, or an automation flow, and you can just take it in absolute wrong direction without the right oversight and controls and sort of management of it, I guess you'd say. So it's almost like you're starting all over with a lot of the same problems, potential pitfalls.
Yeah,
I should say. Not
yeah,
problems.
it's like this. It's the Spider-Man problem. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, my observation so far has been like MVPs have been doing really, really cool things with it. I've seen some demos or presentations from very, very smart sort of IT-minded or either IT pros really who understand who really have that good understanding of what their role and sort of in working with the business and being a partner to the teams that will use the end products. Some of those are really types of people are doing a great job, but it's still such early days.
I'm interested to see how it evolves as well, because the promise of end user, I'm probably never the right person to ask about, how end user computing will be adopted, because I kind of live in that end user land, and I love that stuff. Like that's my background and my skill set, and my capability. And then I think, but why is everyone not using it? And then, as you get a bit older and wiser, you realize that not everyone has that interest or capability. So what's sort of pushed forward, it was a concept that was pushed forward probably 15, 20 years ago already. It's like, and your end users can build their own reports. It's
right.
Like, yes, they can, but they won't because they don't understand the data. They don't understand what they're doing, and it's just too hard. So, right. And I think Power Apps is every evolution of that takes it a little bit further, but I still think there's a very broad population of the community that goes, yes, I could, but I won't. And so getting the people that can, that are close, within or close to the user population, will, like the closer you can get it, the further you can get it, the better off you'll be. And every iteration, like Power Apps is a fantastic iteration, and I think it brings it closer. It's still not going to be, that every rep is going to build their own app.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want it to be. You wouldn't want it to be either. That was a probably quite a flip statement, and then I went, that sounds like complete nonsense. But
But I take your point, though. You don't want everyone trying to build. Yeah, you don't want everyone trying to build their own interface for for their contacts and their leads, and because they think it would suit them. It would be a disaster if that happened.
Yeah, but it's but having people within those organisations, people that are very close to those teams, having an understanding of what's possible and being able to get it started or build something that broadly looks like what they need. And certainly it's a quite different example. It's not a dynamics example. It's a teams example. But the work that's been done at UNSW and the Faculty of Engineering. So there's a professor called David Kellerman who's really taken teams and using teams to teach and have, bots that help answer students' questions and building a lot of automation and artificial intelligence, as well as, really strong comms and communities within his teaching environment.
Right.
He's taken teams all the way to an extent itself, and now it's kind of backtracking through IT and broader adoption across the university. Like it sort of, users can take it so far, and then but it has to sort of come back if it's going to be the thing.
Is he someone who's sort of been fairly high profile, and his use of Teams has been kind of documented? I think I might have seen some of his work and been really kind of blown away by how Teams was being used with notes and with sort of sharing of class materials, and Really kind of unique ways of applying it.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, he's an engineering professor, so he does have a whole bunch of technical capability that most of my sales users don't.
Yeah,
he's
sure.
He's still an end user in the end. He's not, he doesn't live in the IT department, but he's he's got an interest in technology and a vision for how that capability can be used, and he's really taken it and run with it. It's very impressive. So those kind of tools, people can do special things with them. Sometimes it then needs to be kind of just recast for an enterprise level implementation.
Before I let you go, I mean, is there anything else in either, I don't know, the work you're doing today or what you're seeing sort of out in the landscape that you're particularly excited about getting to work on either now or in the near future when it comes to CRM?
There's probably lots of things. I think mostly I'm most excited by the opportunity to go, I guess, back around people that thought, I don't like CRM is not for me, and show them how it is. Like, I don't think we need to go, I'm not, I guess, a technologist for technology's sake. Like, I don't necessarily go, oh my gosh, that new feature, I want to go and find a client to try that new feature with. It's almost more the opposite. I just see all of the existing features and all the work that the CRM vendors have done. And I mean, Dynamics has progressed enormously over the last 5 years. And go, there's a whole bunch of people out there in the world, and some of my clients and some of the prospects that I've worked with that they go, oh, look, I've got this CRM and I hate it. You don't have to hate it. You don't have to hate it. You can fix it. There's good things. You don't have to, weep after every call when you have to go and do your CRM, or you don't have to have a whole admin day to do kind of data entry. Like, the world does not have to be like that anymore. There's enough capability out there to make a CRM usable for you. And it is, I think, now I can't remember the chap's name. Jordan something wrote that, CRM, I don't completely agree with him that CRM doesn't need an ROI anymore. It's a core business system. I still think you need to think about what your CRM does that's going to help you sell more. But I do agree that it's essential in most business environments these days. And to have people have poor adoption and poor utilization and not using the native capabilities of this thing that they're spending money on every month is a crying shame. I'm just excited to go back and sweep up all the people and help them see the promise of the thing that they've already bought.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. It's been a lot of fun hearing about your experiences.
Thanks, Jason. It has been a lot of fun talking about them.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Frieda Maher of SalesPOD for joining. You can see our entire podcast archive at msdynamicsworld.com/podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at msdynamicsworld, and you can reach me directly by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.